Will humans still have a role to play in a world enveloped by AI? In part 1, we looked at some reasons why AI systems won't be able to fully replicate a human, at least functionally. And now we're going to turn to the economic side of the equation and ask ourselves, will there be work for humans to do in an AI-saturated world? I'm going to make my case and lay out my reasoning step by step. And my answer might surprise you.
Written in historical records, documented in Tacitus and Josephus. For those who don't believe us, check the marks of architecture written on a fetus. Neural nets and error correcting codes complete us.
Theos theory.
Reality.
So we need to distinguish between 3 types of labor. There is do work, which is physical work. There is how work, which is knowledge work. And there's why work, which is goal setting work. And it turns out that we have been automating do work for a long time. So for example, a plow is a tool to automate do work. It's a tool to automate the digging of furrows. And it's really good at that. And now we're entering a phase where we're not only automating do work, but we're also automating how work. Because of this, generative AI is going to displace jobs in the near term. However, it's going to create more jobs, create businesses, and create industries in the future. So let's look at the computer. So it turns out that computer used to be a job title. So human computers. And these were people, largely women, who worked for organizations such as NASA to do mathematical calculations by hand. So if you've ever seen the movie Hidden Figures, that is the story of a group of human computers and the advent of computers. But once we got computers, physical computers, that automated out of existence the job of human computer. So people were displaced, people lost their jobs. However, think about all the jobs that have been created because we have computers, right? Not just jobs created, but industries created. In the same way, think about the printing press. We used to have scribes who would write books by hand, and it was a costly and time-consuming task. With the advent of Gutenberg's printing press, we automated out of existence the job of scribe. However, think about all the jobs that have been created because we have print media and print technology. And these are not just jobs, these are businesses, these are industries. In the same way, generative AI is going to displace many of us. However, if we're smart, we can use these systems to generate new businesses and create new industries. Why am I so confident in that? It's because the opportunities to build things using components scales exponentially. So imagine that we could encapsulate some aspect of human capability in a widget. I'll call it a human capability widget, such as turning text into an image. So I could do that. You can tell me in text what you want me to draw and I could draw it, right? So we have one of those capability widgets. Imagine we have another one that's an AI agent. How many different systems can I compose using those components? Well, I can use both of them to create a system. I could use one of them, I could use the other one, or maybe I use neither of them, right? So I guess that's 4 systems, but technically it's 4 minus 1 if we want to be pedantic, okay? If I add one more human capability widget, that number increases not to 5, but to 8 as we go through the different options of the systems we could create. And if we have 4 components following the pattern, we're going to be able to create 16 different systems. And this is just considering whether I include a system or don't include it. This is not taking into account if we're putting them together ordered in a pipeline, because then we have factorial possibilities of reordering. And so the point of this is that the number of opportunities to build systems, the number of systems to explore using these components grows exponentially. However, our ability to investigate them, either ourselves as humans or using AI agents, only scales linearly. The reason why AI agents scale linearly is because of power constraints and compute constraints. So we can only deploy them in a linear fashion, whereas the things to explore using them grows exponentially. So in other words, there's always going to be work to do. If we think about science, there's always going to be interesting scientific questions, and there are going to be more questions that could be raised than there are systems or researchers to investigate them, okay? And so this is considering if we are on an equal playing field with AI, if they could do all the things we can do, including basic arithmetic, okay? But we have unique human capabilities, right? We have the ability to be goal-driven, goal-oriented. We can uniquely do why work. We can say, what are the questions that should be asked? We can ask, what are the systems that we should build? AI systems lack the desire and they lack goals. We are the ones who are the goal setters. So my mental model for large language models is what I think of as the lazy genius model. And so imagine you had a colleague who is quite capable if you tell him to do something. He's able to fulfill it pretty well. However, he never wants to work unless he's told to do something. That is the lazy genius. Maybe a little bit more charitable is the smart undergraduate model, right? So if I am a professor and I have really smart, very capable undergraduate students, they still need direction if we're going to do research together. They need to know what are the interesting questions that we can ask and investigate. Okay. So we are uniquely positioned to do that sort of why work. And in the same way that we shifted away from purely do work to how work, knowledge work, that shift is again taking place from knowledge work now into goal setting work. So in the future, it means that we're going to become project managers and directors, both metaphorically and literally. So because of this, AI systems are going to displace us in the short term, but they could never fully replace us economically. Okay, so you've just watched part 2 of the series. If you haven't seen part 1, that's where I established the functional limitations of generative AI systems. So in other words, why they cannot replace us and replicate us functionally. If you haven't seen that, make sure that you watch that right now and subscribe if you want to be notified for when I drop part 3, which is going to be on the spiritual limitations of generative AI systems. So in other words, why they won't be able to replicate us spiritually, looking at it through the lens of being made in the image of God. Okay, so subscribe right now.